Baldpate in, and I thank you all for being here. And we are honored to have Bruce Davies back with us tonight. And he is one of everybody's favorite speakers. So not only to our audience here, but to our audience in YouTube land out there that is watching, we thank you for supporting us in this way. Next week, we're going to have, again, one of our curators speaking, Maddie, will be here next week, and I think it's going to be a very interesting topic as well. Hopefully we don't all go home itchy. I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but watch for your newsletter. And if by chance you don't, we used to pass around a sheet so you could sign up for our once a week reminder. But if by chance you're not on that list and you'd like to get on our email list for Summer Enchanted Evening, just let Maddie or let the girls know on your way out, and they'll get you signed up for that. But anyways, in the meantime, let's welcome Bruce. Thanks, Bruce, for being here.
Thanks for having me. All right, well, I started talking just real briefly about the fact that they have been trimming some of the forests nearby here, and some of the folks that are here tonight may have driven by and seen that and wondered what it was, but that is the National Forest. And the reason that I bring it up tonight is because if you've ever walked in a deep forest, there's not a lot of grass there. And so not a lot of big animals go there. And so when say a lightning caused fire occurs, it does open up an area. The first thing to come back is the grass and the bushes. Then the aspen and the pine then come later. But first the grass comes, and then all the animals come back. And what has happened over the time that Europeans have first come here is that we always fought fires thinking we were protecting our natural resources, which we were. But little did we know that these forests would become way overgrown. And that's where we are today, because we've been fighting fires. It's only in the last couple decades that we realized that was a mistake. And so now, say in the national park, for instance, if there is a lightning-caused fire off in the wilderness, they will monitor it, but they do let them burn, because fires have been creating meadows for millennia. And so nature is correcting itself. The other thing that you might see around it, people ask me a lot about, are the gray trees. Somebody asked me about the purple trees. I was like, purple trees? Those are the beetle kill, mostly Engelmann spruce. So that is another thing that has occurred because our forests are overgrown. And so the beetles are naturally coming in. In fact, 17 different species of beetles from Mexico to Canada and from California to Colorado are eating the forests. So anyway, let's talk about birds to start with. I've got about 80 slides. Uh-oh, what's going on here? It's not going forward, folks. Hey, where's my technician? I didn't start this. Let's see here. It seems we didn't go that. Oh, there we go. Okay. Technology. I've done a few virtual talks, and I don't know if any of them have gone off perfectly, but smooth sailing here. Hey, one of the things that we never say, I talked about in my promoting this talk, 50 facts. Well, birds fly south, right? And fly north in the summertime, fly south in the winter? Well, not necessarily. And geese are a perfect example of that. We now have geese that live here in Estes Park year-round. So I like to start my talks by saying, never say never. And I actually learned that, I think, maybe at a talk I did at the Baldpate a few years ago, where somebody asked if we had Sandhill Cranes. And no. Well, it wasn't 2 or 3 weeks later, there was a photo in the Estes Park News of 5 Sandhill Cranes standing in the middle of Moraine Park that got blown off course. And that happens. We have several birds down at Estes Park that end up down at the lake that shouldn't be here. Anyway, let's move on. 50 facts. There's actually 80 slides, so if I say 3 things about each slide, that's a few hundred facts. But anyway, one of my favorites, I start with the Clark's Nutcracker. Discovered Clark Expedition. Coolest thing I think about this bird, besides its tremendous spatial memory of 10,000 places that it remembers of seeds that it's hidden, nuts that it's hidden, the Clark's Nutcracker. The male, this is my fact. I'm going to try to give one fact for each slide. And the one for this is that the male of the species has a brood patch, so he can help brood the eggs. And actually sticks around after the eggs are hatched to help out. Okay, better move on. Beautiful bird, sometimes confused with the camp robber. Clark's Nutcracker. Stellar Jay. Oh, I should say some of these photos are mine, some are not. This is mine. And what can I say about the Stellar Jay? I think probably the most amazing thing, and I say this about a few other animals, we have over 300 species of birds that either live here or pass through here. And so the amazing thing about the Stellar Jay is that it does live here year round, which is not an easy feat in our
You get the bird to stay still enough to.
Just luck. I take a lot. I delete a lot. Okay. Magpie. I could talk an hour about magpies. Okay. One thing about magpies that I learned, and I'm always learning new things. Anybody ever been bit by an ant and it burns a little bit? They give off a little bit of formic acid. Magpies do something called anting. Somehow they have learned that if they pick up an ant and squeeze it and rub the acid on themselves, they get rid of mites that they have that live on them. And I can't resist but add one other thing. The reverse is also true. They do remove a lot of ticks off of elk and moose and deer. In fact, they can find so many ticks that they can almost live on those alone through the winter, and are known to stash more than they can eat. Can you imagine removing a fat, plump tick from an elk and hiding it so you can come back for it later? Lots and lots of things. Again, I could talk about ravens and crows for a long time. We have big crows here, sometimes mistaken for ravens. We do have both. Typically, the ravens are a little more solitary, also have a wider vocabulary. But the most amazing thing to me that I think is really interesting is that there is a officer in the Royal Army who is dedicated to protecting the ravens at the Tower of London. And that is his exclusive job. He and his family live there, have full benefits, and do nothing but take care of ravens. Look it up. That's a neat story. Okay. I talk about migrating birds. I kind of call the cedar waxwing a semi-migrating bird because I see them in the winter. Really distinctive little call. Actually, in my bird talks, I do use the Cornell Lab bird calls. I encourage everybody to use that when you're trying to identify birds. Most interesting thing, there's so many, but these are mostly berry eaters. So if there's dry berries around through the winter, then they will stick around. But the most interesting thing is that they have been observed feeding each other. Why? I don't know. Sustaining the flock, or just because they like each other? I don't know. Acrobatic. This is actually my shot, kind of a neat one. Down by the bird sanctuary by Lake Estes along the river. Cool bird. Real easy. I think a lot of people like this one. Easy to identify. The dipper, also known as the ouzel. There apparently is a European bird that is known as the Weasel. So in order to clarify that, they made it the dipper. He bobs up and down, catching the angle, the glare of the water, moving up and down so that he can see the little critters that he eats in the water. And they do oil themselves so that they can swim. Most amazing thing about it is their song. It is the only the only aquatic songbird in North America. This is one of mine. This is kind of hard to see, but you can see a lot of colors. And this is actually a member of the grouse family, a blue grouse or possibly a dusky grouse, but does have the big, can you see the round red eye? That's his cheek. And he has a yellow little top notch, and actually has about the same amount of feathers, tail feathers, as a turkey, and really just about as pretty, and prettier than a peacock, we'll say. They do have a strange song. Sometimes when I'm having people look up the sounds, it's really just a drumming noise. It's not really a song. Really hard to discern. There's a little better picture. They do live way up there at about 10,000 feet or so, or can. They have a little wider range than the ptarmigan. White-tailed ptarmigan. Most amazing thing, he has feathered feet to stand on the snow because he lives at about 10,000 feet and really doesn't move much, maybe a few hundred feet up or down from there its whole life, which I think is amazing when you think of the different kinds of 10,000 kinds of species of birds on the planet, some that migrate from one end of the earth to the other, or many that fly thousands of miles, some that go out to sea for 10 years like the albatross before coming back to mate. These guys may never leave the square acre where they were hatched out. Their nostrils are also feather lined. Turkeys, I love turkeys. I won't talk too much about them. I'll get emotional talking about Ben Franklin and all that stuff. Actually, we should say something. Most amazing thing is when I'm a native, and when I was a kid, we never saw turkeys around. Did you remember seeing turkeys around here as a kid? Really? Yeah, I don't remember seeing. I see them almost every day now. I mean, okay, the amazing thing, and many big birds do this, they build their nests on the ground. They lay an egg, the hen does. She leaves, goes, feeds, come back the next day. A day later, lays another egg. Leaves, goes, eats, comes back another day. She does that 10 or 12 times before she sits on the eggs. About 30 days later, they all hatch within 2 or 3 hours of each other and never leave, and leave the nest, never to return. Mom never has to feed them. They feed themselves from day one. How different that is from other birds that we know that are fed. She does give them comfort and protection. They can go under her wings if need be, but yeah. Okay, better move on. We got a lot to talk about. Flicker. Orange fluted flicker, northern flicker. His name, maybe that's the neatest thing, the color. Kingfisher, this is a belted kingfisher. It's actually only the female that has a belt. So what do you suppose this is? That's a female. See the belt? No belt. Belt, no belt. Actually, kingfisher related to the kookaburra, which is way bigger. These are smaller than a robin, or about the size of a robin. Build their nests in the sides of river banks. They tend to go up away from the water, higher up, 3 to 5 feet into the bank where they nest. They dig holes to lay there, and high enough so that they don't get flooded. by the water fluctuations. This is a migratory bird, which we love, the western tanager. And just migration, think of it. I was in Mexico a couple years ago on vacation, and I saw a tanager down there. And I thought, and this I think was in February or March or something like that, and I thought, he's going to get ready to go to Estes now. It's about time. That's the alluvial fan. Hey, here's a little predator, a little tiny guy, a little raptor called the Shrike. Look at the raptor beak and the tiny little petite feet that couldn't hold anything. So what he does is when he catches his prey, he puts it on something pointy like a fence or a thorn or something so that he can eat it. But I think the neatest thing about these guys, the fact is that they use other birds' noises. They lure birds in using other birds' calls so that they can predate them, eat them. Everybody's favorite, the owl. Who doesn't love the owls? Great horned owl. He is great. Doesn't have horns. Doesn't have tufted ears either. His ears are down below, although his whole face is really designed to allow them to hear things. It's like a satellite dish absorbing sound. I could talk again about owls for an hour, but probably besides their flightless flight or noiseless flight that cannot even be measured in decibels because of their tightly grown feathers, but the fact is their ears are at different heights so that they can hear both and hunt, and their eyesight is just 10 times way better than ours. Kind of cat-like, sitting up in a tree. That's one of my photos there. The osprey, also a migratory bird. Let's see, besides being just a deft fisher, better than a lot of birds at catching, has a higher success rate, so much so that bigger birds like bald eagles are known to steal from them. And it is the male also who helps a lot, builds the nest, in fact, to lure a prospective mate. The coolest fact is that the osprey, we know it as the osprey, is migratory. They're clear from coast to coast, but is also known as the Seahawk. Seattle Seahawks, that's an osprey. Same bird. Red-tailed hawk, probably the most common hawk here. We have 7 species of hawks. Got to see the falcons this year. That was super cool. Let's see, the call of the red, besides its red tail, very easy to identify, is the call. It is extremely evocative of the Old West. When you hear one, you expect to be at the OK Corral or something at high noon when you hear a hawk call. Speaking of bald eagles, I guess the thing, there's so many things again about bald eagles. It's our nation's symbol for what it represents. We place values on animals sometimes, the freedom to soar. It is an animal that lives in the air and is at home on the ground too. They spend a lot of time walking around on the ground looking for stuff, and of the water. So they are of all the elements, and I guess that's probably the coolest thing about them. They have made just a tremendous comeback, and from the days of DDT, right? And just filling the river valleys. Bar Lake down near Denver, I think, had some dozens of them down there near the airport this year. And anyway, so that's that. That's birds. Anybody? We won't take an intermission. Let's move on to animals. I've never done bird. These are both 1-hour presentations. So I'm doing them. I'm not keeping you here for hours. So trying to think of one thing about each animal. Probably the neatest thing, besides the fact that in the lower 48 states, it's pretty much all we have are black bears. There's a few grizzlies up in northern Wyoming, up into Montana, Idaho, even into Washington State, but no brown bears in the lower 48 states. So really all we see are black bears. In the east, Georgia, New Jersey, they have black bears. All their black bears are black. Here in the west, our black bears are only about 30% are brown, and about 30% are some other variation. Like this one is kind of a light cinnamon. They saw what is called a spirit bear in the park about 10 years ago now that was almost white. But the most amazing thing is how they regulate their own populations biologically by the amount of food that they eat. If the sow bear does not eat enough in the fall, or there's not enough food around, she needs about 20,000 calories a day, right? Her system recognizes this after she enters into hibernation, and she will simply reabsorb her fertilized eggs from the spring that she's been carrying all summer. And but in times of plenty, like we've been having these last few years, we're seeing a lot more twins and triplets. So we'll talk more about, well, that in a minute, but isn't that cool? Actually, I can't resist but say, a lot of people don't realize that mama bear wakes up her metabolism resumes to its normal rate in roughly February, stays awake during the birth of the cub or cubs, nurtures the cubs for a week or two, then her metabolism again slows down typically. The cubs do not hibernate. They sleep about 20 hours a day. I should move on. We got a bunch of slides. But the neat thing is she teaches them all they need to know that summer. Maybe not all they need to know, because they do hibernate again with her that following winter. So it's not till their second summer that they are completely weaned. Standing up to sniff the highway of smells drifting around in the air. Can you imagine how tormented they are? We don't notice all the smells they do. Actually, my aunt lives way out in a place you'd never expect a bear to get in. Got into their house the other night before last. They live way out east in Estes Park. Better move on. A lot of these are my shots. Oh, I guess I have to explain this one. I do talk about ancient times here, and we did have ancient bears that roamed here. If you do the quick math, translating kilograms to pounds, I believe that's about 4,000 pounds. Our bears, the biggest bears we have are maybe 400 pounds. 4,000. We used to have bears 10 times this big here. Oh, I have to explain this too. Bear poop. This is at one of 11 greenhouses in the country right here at Rocky Mountain National Park, where they harvest seeds to do trail repairs from bear poop. This is in the greenhouse. All these seeds came from one pile. I think there's 1,200 plants. Mostly chokecherry. 60% chokecherry, I think they said. This is right at the Continental Divide, Milner Pass. The elk. You know, a lot of guides talk about bunnies and elk and pretty flowers and all that, and I do too, but there's some serious things going on around here. Thank goodness we have people that care. We have about 100 scientists, 170 rangers altogether, but about 100 scientists that are working to figure out ways to restore balance that we're missing here in the park. And that is why we have the fences that you see in the park. Those are called exclosures to exclude the elk. Wolves were hunted to extinction here in the late 1800s to protect the cattle. The late 1800s to protect the cattle and sheep. And so now an adult elk really has no predators. And they live with us. They're migratory. One of the cool things is you kind of know what time of year it is by what the elk are doing. They do shed twice a year. They've just shed their winter coats and they just look so gorgeous right now. Let's see, the amazing thing. Still up at Milner Pass. That's the Poudre River, by the way, right there. You can step across it. About 10 miles below here, people whitewater raft on it. That's the Continental Divide, of course. Let's see, there was a different species of elk that lived here that was hunted to extinction. I guess I'll make that my fascinating fact. All of the elk that we have here were brought here by F.O. Stanley back in the early 1900s because they had been hunted to extinction here to feed the miners and the settlers. Migratory. That's out east. East of town, looking back towards the range there. Sorry about the telephone lines, but still pretty cool. Mule deer, so called because of their huge ears. I just learned this. I told you guys I'm always learning new things. Learned a new word, pronking. It was in a book here I read at the Baldpate, actually. Pronking, that is when an animal uses all 4 feet hit the ground at the same time to make them go faster. Pronking, P-R-O-N-K-I-N-G, I believe. Yeah, and it's, you know, that's how they are able to go as fast as they do. Very common to have twins. Elk, very rare to have twins. Bighorn sheep, we have 5 herds of bighorn sheep in the region here. Pinewood Springs, there's a group down in Big Thompson Canyon. Between Pinewood and Elkhorn, or Big Elk Meadows, I'm sorry. There's a herd there we see sometimes. There's a herd at Milner Pass. This is up by Rock Cut, of course, looking towards Long's Peak. And that's it. There's 5 herds, roughly about 300 in the region. 30 to, I've heard as many as 50 in each herd. Of course, that fluctuates. I've read that the sheep are doing fairly well in some places, particularly the herd, I guess, down in Pinewood Springs. But one of my friends, who's a photographer, Richard Hahn, I'm sure he doesn't mind me mentioning his name, he has a shop in town here, had a couple thrilling moments this year. He saw 9 lambs at one time. That's a lot. I've never seen that many, and I've done a lot of trips into the park. So that's cool. My little theory is that the park was closed for a few months. Any farmers here? You know, sheep are very sensitive. They can actually spontaneously abort their young just because they're nervous. And that is part of the reason why we watch the sheep very carefully. We normally have volunteers in at sheep lakes, trying to let the sheep pass to get down, because otherwise people stop and take pictures and stuff like that. And so anyway, I think the park being quiet, I've talked to a few rangers. They said, boy, those first days when they came in, there were just animals everywhere. Around every corner you went, there were animals there. And the other thing that Richard caught, which is just amazing, he caught well, here, let me move on. I better move on. I'll get back to Richard in just a second, actually. Most amazing thing, their hooves are rough, and the rocks are rough. And they seem to mesh perfectly so that they can magically cling to the rocks where they are safe. And unfortunately, those 5 herds that I talked about, never get to see each other because they are too nervous to cross the big meadows that we have, the parks we call them. And so those 5 herds never get to see each other. Well, people say, why don't we just mix them up? You know, move some here, move some. Well, you can't do that with sheep because they do have a hierarchy. So you have to be careful. You can't just pluck one down and expect him to thrive, or her, because they have to earn their place.
Is there no herd over in Never Summers anymore?
You know, I actually speak of our region, Never Summers. I kind of consider out of the park on the north side, but is there a herd there?
Well, there used to be.
Yeah, you're probably right. I bet you're right. I'll check it out. I'll get back to you on that.
Pooter Lake.
Pooter Lake is the Milner Pass, and that herd is there. In fact, I saw about 30 of them the other day with lambs. So that's one of the 5. I don't include the Never Summers, just a beautiful place. I love spending time there, just outside the park. Actually, it borders the Kawanichi Valley, so it's right on the edge. But I'll get back to you at our next talk. Moose. Some people argue that moose have lived here a long time and have historically been here. From my information that I have found, the species that we have are Shiras moose that were brought in from Idaho in 1978, and they have thrived. Wildlife managers certainly did the research to find that they would not conflict with other big animals. Whereas mountain goats, you will never find here. They can possibly make their way here. They would actually be considered an invasive species competing with the sheep and would be removed. But the moose, we love. Everybody wants to see a moose. And of course, having been called Bruce the Moose my whole life, I like moose too. Females do not have horns. The sheep, the females do have horns. I said horns, sorry. Antlers. Elk, deer, and moose all have antlers they shed every year. Sheep have horns. Well, then why is our main street called Elkhorn? I don't know. Cute. One of our favorite animals. When I tell people that these guys sleep from as early as September to as late as May, I'm surprised how many people say that sounds terrific. Always surprised when people say that, but how common it is. People like that. And isn't that something? They sleep most of their lives, 8 months of the year, as much as 8 months. Why come out when your house is covered in snow, you know? Hey, did you know that snow melts at a rate of about a foot a day once it reaches about 70 degrees? So we lose about 20 feet of snow in about 3 weeks in places up there. It melts that fast. Some places never melt. We do have 5 glaciers in Rocky Mountain National Park, mostly south and into the wilderness areas. Marmot, yellow-bellied marmot. This would be up at Rock Cut, where the other herd of sheep is. Or you know, they don't stay strictly there, but they really don't cross those wide valleys, because that's when, I'm talking about the sheep again, that's when they're subject to coyotes and mountain lions and stuff. One of our favorites. Yeah, this is stock photo, not mine, so whoever did it, thank you, but it's just, you know, the epitome of a pika. The busy little rabbit that spends the whole summer collecting grass so that he'll have food, grass and flowers, obviously, to eat through the winter. Each pika, which is about the size of my fist, will gather enough grass to fill a bathtub. That's how much they need to eat through the winter. Again, like the marmot, depending upon the snow to cover them up from the really super cold temperatures. Interesting fact, body temperature is only 74 degrees. That is why you only find these animals at roughly 12,000 feet. They can be down as low as 10,000, but that becomes too hot for them. Scientists are watching them very closely. If the planet is warming, like a lot of scientists believe, these little cute little things have nowhere to go. They cannot just go live elsewhere.
When they put their food somewhere, how does it stay there and not get either?
Thank you for asking that. They do make tiny little haystacks to dry out their food before they store it. Ingenious, huh? Except that your friends might try to steal your haystacks at that point. They do live down in the cracks and crevices of the mountain, way down in. So they are filling up those cracks and crevices all through the summer. They spend the whole summer, which summer is relative up on the tundra, right? Summer is about 60 days. From the time the snow is finally melted until it peaks and then ebbs. And then the elk start migrating back down for the rut. This summer has flown by, huh? August coming up real quick. Of course, we have predators too. These are really pretty frequent. Hey, here's an interesting fact about predators in general. Over 90% of predation, whether you're talking about lions or whatever, happens at night. So that is why you rarely ever see that happen. Most of the activity happens at night, especially like, well, I'll talk about mountain lions in a second, but one of the things that helps these guys out is in the wintertime, they do lose the pigment in their fur and turn white, also known as an ermine, but it's a weasel. Hey, the weasel family is huge. Did you realize that otters are in the weasel family? Martens, mink, skunks, badgers, and the largest of all, the wolverine, is a weasel. Interesting group, from otters to wolverines. And ferrets, I didn't mention. Those are also weasels. Sad and interesting fact. I know a lot of guides talk about Peter Cottontail and all that, but in a warming planet, these animals whose pigment changes is not altered by the warming planet. So if the planet is warming, as some scientists believe, those animals like the snowshoe hare, the snowy owl, the foxes that turn white, they lose their pigment, that will not change. Unfortunately, they will now be white in a brown world. And so the opposite thing will happen. Instead of being able to hide from their prey will easily be able to see them. And vice versa. So these are all things that scientists lay awake at night worrying about. But this is really why the exclosures are built in the park. Trying to restore the habitat that the elk have eaten all of the rhizomes from the aspen and the willows, and that is the beavers' food too, as well as their dam building material and their home building material. They build from willows and aspen. So when the elk ate all their food, a lot of those animals left, as well as a lot of the other animals that I just talked about that made beaver ponds their homes, like otters and muskrats and raccoons and all the other animals, insects, fish, turtles, all left because, why? We killed off all the wolves, right?
When you say left, does that mean they died or they left?
Well, I'm speaking again about our little corner, my little corner where I operate, and that is Rocky Mountain National Park, and mostly in Horseshoe Park and Moraine Park. Those should be wetlands. Those had hundreds and hundreds of beavers. I heard they said there may have been 900 beavers in Moraine Park at one time. You wouldn't have been able to see the river at all because the willows would have covered the river. The elk have eaten them all. And so that is why we put up the fences. And it's working. It's a 30-year project. We're about 10 years in, but it has restored those areas where it has worked or hasn't been washed out. We lost some fencing in the flood of 2013 that they haven't rebuilt yet. But it is working. Now, there are beavers in the area. These are my photos actually off of Fish Creek over there. Here's the fascinating fact about beavers. Besides the fact that they create habitat where lots of other animals live and create wetlands that absorb carbon dioxide and nitrogen out of the air that's harmful to us. Wetlands absorb that stuff. So we need wetlands. But the most amazing thing, and those of you that have heard this talk before already know this, that the thing that causes beavers to build dams is the sound of water running. They have an innate desire to stop the sound of running water, and that's what causes them to build dams and create habitat where lots of other animals can come and live. And so down on Fish Creek, we had this wonderful colony of beaver that got washed out back in 2013. And so the Estes Valley Watershed Coalition, who has kind of taken over, doing the finishing touches on the infrastructure, basically. The infrastructure's pretty been repaired, but we're still rebuilding the habitat in places. But what they did is they created these ripple makers, basically just sticks. Oh, I wonder if I add. Here they are, right here.
Are there beavers back in the Fish Creek area?
They are, and they're expanding.
Okay, I
And
didn't realize that.
yes. They're nocturnal mostly, so again, you don't see them if you drive by during the day. They're sleeping. But this is what I'm talking about. This is over on Fish Creek. This is built by the Watershed Coalition. Thank goodness they've taken down that terrible elk fencing that they had up there that was just falling down all over the place. Has anybody know? Yeah, take a drive. They've really done, and that's volunteers, folks. We have the best volunteers. I'd match them up against anybody here. We have 3,000 volunteers that work in the park that help. I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars worth of work that they do. But those sticks sticking up. Now, you see some debris is just washed up against it. That's not beavers, but that is creating a little ripple. And there's not enough food around here to sustain or to build with yet. No willows or aspen here. But once the willows are restored, the beavers will move back in and they will build right over the top of those wooden little structures, which is what they did up above, up by Chile Camp. So, all right, I better hurry up. Let's see. Oh, gosh. Let's see. We're in great time. Wow, that was fast. I guess I can go back and start over, right? No, we'll slow it down a little here because coyotes are fascinating. Is anybody keeping track of how many facts I've given you so far? It was supposed to be 50, but I think we're over. Anyway, doesn't matter. That, yes, please.
The coyote, I'm not seeing it in our neighborhood anymore. I don't see some of the animals that I used to see.
Yes, yeah.
I don't know
Well,
what's going on.
there's cycles for sure. And actually, I'm hearing from a lot of people that they're seeing a lot of mice and voles and things right now. And so they will come back. The foxes, the coyotes, and lots of other, they will. But once they have eaten everything where in an area, they'll move on. But in fact, really my most amazing fact relates exactly to what you're just saying. So, at one time in history, coyotes were found in the Great Basin only. And the Great Basin comprises the area kind of where we are now, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, down into Texas. That is known as the Great Basin. That's the only place you could find coyotes about 150 years ago. Now, we know they killed off the wolves. They put a bounty on them. So bounty hunters came in, killed them all off. Same thing with coyotes. We have more coyotes now than we've ever had. In fact, their numbers have expanded to every corner of the United States. From Florida to Maine, up into Canada, over to California. Yeah, they've adapted. They have adapted. You know, or a lot of people that know about animals, wolves are pack animals where the alpha male and the alpha female are the only ones that breed. The rest of the pack is in support. That's the way coyotes used to function. They adapted, and so now not only the alpha female, but other females started breeding. And they used to only breed when they were 2-3 years old. Now they're breeding at a year old. They used to only have a litter a year. Now they're having a couple litters a year. Getting back to my friend Richard Hahn, has a photograph, 14 puppies in one group, and he is speculating, as he only can, that it's a couple of groups that got together. You know, it's normal to see one coyote. That is normal. It's also normal to see two. It's also normal to see three. And there's no set number. There is an expression, the lone wolf. That's kind of a misnomer. There really is no such thing as a lone wolf. Wolves are not lone. They are pack animals. Lone coyote, yes. I guess that's kind of to illustrate that it's not common, a lone wolf. But isn't that something? These doggone coyotes are just wonderful in their ability to adapt. And oh, here's something for you too. A lot of us have heard of the coy wolf, right? The coyotes are actually breeding with wolves up in the Great Lakes region in that way. But interestingly, and I just learned this recently in the last year, it's not the wolves breeding with the coyotes. It's the coyotes breeding with the wolves, showing again their dominant genetic disposition. Cool, huh? Coyotes. Actually, we were awakened the other night. We had all our windows open, and one coyote started singing, and we could hear him from every window, all across the valley at night. That's going on. And even up onto the tundra. Sitting there waiting for some pika. That's also at Rock Cut. We were cruising by here on the Peak to Peak Highway, where they've done some repairs there, which is also looking really nice recently. In fact, I don't know if this pile of dirt is even there anymore. And some guest said, "Hey, I see some goats. Turn around." I was like, "Oh, I want to see goats." Sure, I'll turn around. We turned around, and it was a pair of mating coyotes, and we sat there and watched them for 15 or 20 minutes, yipping and calling to each other. Obviously, this is still in the wintertime when they mate. Strong significance in the indigenous cultures here. Kawanichi Valley is actually, the Kawanichi is the Arapaho word for coyote. And lots of neat legends, stories about the coyotes. One that I've heard is that they delivered fire to the first people using their tail. And that's why it's a little singed. They dipped their tail in the fire. Actually, one of the neat ones from the Kawanichi, the Treaty of 1851 gave the other side of the Continental Divide, the western side, to the Ute. This side was Apache country. But a Ute legend, they believe they were here forever, that there was no beginning. They didn't migrate here. And but that the Great Spirit had a basket full of sticks. And the coyote is kind of known as the trickster, the prankster, the jokester. Knocked over this basket, and the sticks fell out and became people, and they went to many places. And the sticks that stayed were allowed to stay there, and that was the Ute. So, kind of a neat story.
Did you say the coyote is more prevalent here now than it used to be?
More than ever. They're down in the cities. They're
That's interesting, because back in Kansas, where I grew up, there used to be a lot of them, and now there's not many.
well, Kansas is definitely one that had probably the most recent bounties on them for sure.
Well, they used to have bounties.
Yeah. Yep.
And they used to have coyote hunts where they
Mm-hmm.
take a 5
Whole trailer loads full of them. Yeah. And they used them, they would sell them, the pelts, but the numbers certainly can change regionally. She was asking, a lot of people say they don't see as many. One of my theories is that there is actually more food now than ever, and so they don't have to, that's just my theory. They don't have to move around. 'Cause there's plenty of food to eat.
This year there are plenty of mice.
And squirrels, I've never seen so many. The ground almost seems like it's alive sometimes. You look out there.
I think that happened because of the last winter was rather warm,
Yes.
and they all lived.
Yeah. And the scary thing is if you see, 12, there's 12 more for each one of those. Yeah. We have 7 types of squirrels around here. Did you know that? And an interesting thing about where did tree squirrels and ground squirrels diverge? Sometime in history, where tree squirrels typically don't hibernate, but ground squirrels do. Why? It's because of the food they eat, but yeah.
I'm sorry, if I'm mentioning squirrels, what happened to we used to see mostly the black Ebert squirrels.
Ebert squirrels.
I haven't seen one in years.
Go up to the alluvial fan, all of a sudden I've seen a bunch up there.
Are they really? The black
Yes,
ones?
yes.
And the gray, I haven't, maybe years
The
ago.
gray or the chicory,
Well,
because of the noise, the sound that they make. It's chicory,
the chicory's a new one for our neighborhood.
the little gray one.
They come and go, well,
Yeah,
they're very territorial.
plenty of food up in the tops of those trees. Look at the pine cones. Yeah, I saw one there yesterday. Bats, the only flying mammal. Give birth to live young, of course. Some species do hibernate. We actually have 9 species in Colorado. Some which stick around year-round. Most of the bats are migratory, though. The Mexican brown bats are probably the one we have the most of. And probably one of the most amazing things about this animal is that a big colony of bats can eat a ton of insects. And I'm not speaking figuratively. I'm speaking literally 2,000 pounds of insects in a night. The way they fly, we know they use echolocation, but they can eat a few hundred in just a matter of minutes, just collecting them off of their wings as they fly. They take, they just pull them right off of their wings as they're flying, and find the, yeah, cool, and kind of gross too, but. Bobcat. I haven't seen a bobcat in a while, but they're there. I've seen a few photos here and there. Difficult to tell the difference between a bobcat. Oh, there's one of my photos I stuck in there. Isn't that cool? I forgot I put that in there. Looks like just a regular house cat, doesn't it? I always remind people to look up who knows how many bobcats you've walked under. Of course, we're not on their menu, so don't worry about it. They eat rabbits and squirrels and stuff. But anyway, the lynx and the bobcat both have cheek hair. The big cheek hair and the black tips on their ears. But the lynx has huge feet, which are not proportional to their size. They're huge. Perfect for traveling across snow, eating their favorite food, the snowshoe hare, which is another animal that turns white in the winter and brown in the summer. They lose the pigment in their fur as the days grow shorter. We don't have lynx around here as far as we know. They really do live in the more remote areas where they depend upon snow. We don't have enough snow really to support them, or enough snowshoe hares for that matter, although we do have a few. Well, this is my last animal. I actually got to spend some time with a fella who's got some notoriety for his knowledge, a fellow by the name of David Niels, who really interesting person. Who thinks that mountain lions live in caves? I used to. Am I the only one that thought that mountain lions live in rocks and in caves and things like that? They can. But in our area, they are much more likely to live under a spruce tree, whose branches reach clear down to the ground and create a nice secluded little spot under a tree where they can raise their young. Oh, I was talking about bears earlier. Bears are not territorial. A bear can wander 400 miles in a year. And they can, but don't necessarily hibernate in the same place. They wander all over the place. Mountain lions are strictly territorial. In fact, they are known to fight to the death to protect their territory. Here in our region and elsewhere, anyway, let me start by saying mountain lions are actually the most widely dispersed mammal in North and even down into South and Central America. They have many, many different names. It's all the same animal. Here in this area, a mountain lion needs roughly about 30 to 40 square miles, roughly. It can vary a little bit. They do mark their territories. They tend to respect each other's territories because it can be big trouble if you don't. But down in Arizona, where they don't have as much food, their territories can be hundreds of miles. They're protected territory that is their own, maybe 200 or 300 square miles. So interesting that it's food that determines the size of the territory. I actually got to see my first one here in Colorado. I had seen one in Florida a few years ago. Down there they call it a panther. Same animal though. But I did get to see one in Horseshoe Park this past year for a split second.
I saw one over on the west side earlier this year.
Did ya? How cool. Were you able to watch it for a moment, or
Right across the road.
it just went across the road? Yes. Mm-hmm. Same animal. Catamount, cougar, yeah, those are all the same animal.
that you-
Clear down into Central America, down into, you'll find them in Brazil. It's the same animal. They have a different name, although sometimes they do call it the puma. Yeah, yeah. Well, I could go on, but that's actually all as far as the slides I have for today. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. That was a lot. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. And I do have a couple cards over there. I am doing tours. I started to say I've started doing a little different kind of tour that's kind of fun. It's a caravan tour where I have two-way radios. As a guide, I can come and go into the park. I don't need to make a reservation. So what I'm trying to do is lead my guests rather than having them ride with me. So we'll see. I've done 3 of them this week, and it works out pretty well, especially for people with little kids, because they can just stay in their car seat. And we stop at every pull-out, get out, talk about what we're seeing, maybe take a short hike. And yeah, that's what I do. So, and I get paid sometimes. So, yeah, thank you guys. See you next time. I will find